In 2016, a silver-haired man in a turtleneck stepped off a plane at Manchester Airport, carrying a mission no one else dared to accept: to transform a rich but soulless club into the greatest team in England. His name was Pep Guardiola. And what he brought wasn't just victories, it was a revolution. Over the next 7 years, Manchester City became an unstoppable machine. They didn't just win, they overwhelmed. They didn't just play well, they played as if the entire world had gathered to watch a performance. Pep turned fullbacks into midfielders. Turned goalkeepers into deep-lying playmakers smarter than most number 6s. He took players many had written off and turned them into central figures in a football ballet. But then, in year 9, it all fell apart. Within months, a treble-winning squad became fragile, fractured and trophyless. Rodri went down with injury. De Bruyne prepared his exit. Pep stayed, but for the first time, people began to ask, what more does he have left to give? This video isn't just about Guardiola's journey at Manchester City. It's a story of ambition without limits and the human limits of chasing perfection. A revolution that began with vision, and might end in exhaustion. When Pep Guardiola agreed to take charge of Manchester City, many believed he would tear the Premier League apart. He'd already reshaped football in Spain with Barcelona. He'd won everything domestic in Germany with Bayern. So surely, England, no matter how intense, was just the next stage for a tactical genius? The reality was far less glamorous. In his first season, 2016-17, City won nothing. They finished third in the league. They were knocked out of the Champions League by Monaco. They failed in both domestic cups. Pep didn't hide his disappointment. At one point, he admitted, "Maybe I'm not suited to English football." But behind every defeat was an experiment. He refused to accept long balls and hopeful crosses as the norm. He didn't believe in luck. He wanted total control. To achieve that in the Premier League, he had to break every convention. For example, instead of bombing fullbacks down the wing to deliver crosses, he pulled them inward, turning them into central midfielders. Fabian Delph, once a middling midfielder, became a key left-back in this inverted system. Kyle Walker, known for blistering pace, was told to stop, hold position, and learn to move the ball like a playmaker. Pep also redefined training. Before players could understand the ball, they had to understand space. They were taught where to stand, which way to face even before receiving the ball. Every pass, every step, was calculated. His first season wasn't about silverware. It was a year-long laboratory, a tactical test zone. He knew the title would have to wait. But he needed to lay the foundation. A philosophy. A structure. A squad that could think on the pitch, not just run. And he did it. Even without trophies, City changed. They shifted from a counter-attacking team to a positional system, pressing high, dominating possession, choking the opponent's rhythm. The players began to understand. This is no longer the same club. They weren't champions yet. But they had become something entirely new, ready to dominate, just one season later. The 2017-18 season. Manchester City won the Premier League with 100 points, an unprecedented milestone. But this wasn't just a championship. It was a declaration. Pep's controlled football could conquer even the most chaotic league on earth. Every weekend, fans didn't just come to see them when they came to see art. Because this wasn't just 11 men playing football. It was an orchestra, conducted by Pep. From defense to attack, every movement followed a rhythm. The rhythm of absolute control. An imaginary shape but real control. Pep Guardiola introduced a shape no one had seen before, the 2-3-2-3. Two centre-backs at the base. Above them, a trio, usually a holding midfielder flanked by two full-backs who tucked inside. Then two advanced midfielders. And finally, 3 attackers stretching the width. Sounds complicated? It was. But that was the point, it was a machine, not a formation. With the ball, City crushed opponents using constant triangles, fluid rotations, and pre-planned angles. Without the ball, they triggered immediate counter-pressing, what the Germans call gegenpressing, aiming to win it back within 5 seconds. One misstep, one player out of place, the system collapsed. But when it worked, it was pure footballing art. The rebirth of ordinary players. Nobody expected Raheem Sterling, mocked for his missed chances, to score 18 goals that season. No one thought Fernandinho, at 32, could anchor midfield with such tactical intelligence. And no one predicted Ederson, a goalkeeper, would become the first spark in every City attack, a quarterback in gloves. Pep didn't buy the best players. He built an environment where ordinary players became their best selves. He didn't wait for genius to arrive. He created conditions where players were forced to become exceptional. Why win if not to change how people think? For Pep Guardiola, winning wasn't the goal. It was the consequence of doing things the right way. He once said, "I hate defensive football. If I lose while controlling the game, I can live with it. But if I win playing the wrong style, that's a failure to me." To him, victory meant nothing unless his team controlled space, controlled the ball, and controlled the opponent's mind. A title of absolute persuasion. That season, City won 32 out of 38 league games. They scored 106 goals. Conceded just 27. They strung together 18 consecutive wins, the longest run in Premier League history. In some matches, the opponent didn't register a single shot on target. In others, City held 78% possession, a monopoly over time and territory. No one could stop them. No one even fully understood how they worked, because everything was so fast, so precise, so ruthlessly elegant. And that was just the beginning. The next season, 2018-19, they were arguably even better. They didn't hit 100 points, but they won a historic title race by a single point, 98 to Liverpool's 97. A goal line clearance against Burnley saved the title. A stunning volley from Kompany, their oldest centre-back, kept the dream alive. City no longer won effortlessly. They had learned how to grind out victory when pushed to the brink. The summit from which you can only fall or evolve. Those 2 seasons, 2017 to 2019, were Pep's era of total control in English football. But absolute control is a double-edged sword. Once perfection slips even slightly, the system is fragile. And the cracks began to show. They didn't appear in the league. They appeared in the Champions League, where Guardiola, obsessed with preparation, started to overthink and self-sabotage. If the Premier League was where Pep proved his dominance, then the Champions League became the stage where he began to lose his composure. Not because the opponents were too strong. Not because City lacked mentality. But because the man who demanded total control could no longer control himself. 2017-18, the Liverpool collapse. City entered the Champions League quarter-finals brimming with confidence. They had already won the League Cup. The Premier League was virtually secured. But in one chaotic night at Anfield, everything fell apart. Liverpool scored 3 goals in 31 minutes. Pep stood frozen on the touchline, unable to understand why his players kept losing the ball, losing duels, losing control. In the return leg, he was sent off for confronting the referee. City were eliminated. But that wasn't the biggest shock. 2018-19, the Tottenham tragedy and VAR. Another quarter-final. This time, against Tottenham. In the first leg, Pep made a baffling choice, he benched both De Bruyne and Sane. City lost 1-0. The second leg would become one of the most emotionally wrenching matches in Champions League history. City won 4-3. They thought they had done it. But in stoppage time, a last-minute winner from Sterling was ruled out by VAR offside by inches. The Etihad fell silent. Guardiola dropped to his knees, head in his hands, eyes welling up. He hadn't lost because of tactics. Not because of ability. But because of a few centimeters, and a piece of technology. 2019-20, overthinking against Lyon. No one forgets the loss to Lyon, the 7th-place team in Ligue 1. All season long, City had played 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. But for this one match, Pep switched to an unfamiliar 3-5-2 just to guard against counter-attacks. The result? Confused players. Sluggish movement. They got hit on the break, exactly what Pep feared. And they were eliminated. The media had a phrase for it. Pep is so smart, he defeats himself. Fear of failure or obsession with perfection. Strangely, every time Guardiola entered a Champions League knockout round, he seemed to forget his own golden rule. Stay true to the philosophy. But when it came to the biggest matches, he often changed the lineup at the last minute. As if he no longer trusted the very system that brought him this far. At Barcelona, he had Messi. At Bayern, he failed in 3 straight semifinals. At City, the Champions League became his greatest obsession. And people began to ask, is Pep still Pep? From 2017 to 2021, City were always among the favorites. But time after time, they were knocked out by small margins, surprise errors, and often, by Pep's own tactical changes. For him, it was unbearable. He couldn't accept losing due to system failure. But he also couldn't accept winning without integrity. That contradiction between logic and emotion, between artistry and reality, kept haunting him. Especially in Europe's biggest competition. The cracks had begun even if City hadn't collapsed yet. The 2019-20 season ended without a trophy. And whispers began to grow. Is Pep's cycle coming to an end? He denied it. He rebuilt. But from that moment on, he knew. Winning in England was no longer enough. To be considered truly great, he had to conquer Europe. Not just once, but on his own terms, with his own philosophy. And that became his fuel for the next chapter. To reclaim control, and rewrite the story. The 2022-23 season, the treble. After years of failure, frustration, and heartbreak in the Champions League, Pep Guardiola finally achieved the dream he had chased for nearly a decade. The historic treble with Manchester City. Premier League. FA Cup. Champions League. 3 of football's most coveted trophies in one season. A feat that, before Pep, had only ever been accomplished in English football by Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United in 1999. Not a miracle, a masterplan. Unlike Manchester United's last-minute drama in 1999, this wasn't about destiny or late heroics. This was cold, calculated domination. City didn't win by luck. They won because every detail had been rehearsed to the millimeter. They didn't explode in the final 5 minutes, they suffocated opponents for 90. From February onward, City were unstoppable. They overtook Arsenal with a relentless winning run in the league. They dismantled Real Madrid 4-0 in the Champions League semi-final, a tactical clinic. And in the final against Inter Milan, they weren't flashy, they were cold, ruthless, efficient. 1 goal from Rodri playing like a peak-era Busquets was enough. No wild celebrations. Just relief. Haaland, the piece everyone feared would break the machine. When City signed Erling Haaland, many questioned it. Could Pep even use a traditional striker? He'd built systems around false nines, Messi, Foden, Bernardo, even De Bruyne. He'd once rejected Ibrahimovic for being too rigid. But Haaland didn't break the system. He elevated it. In his first season, Haaland scored 52 goals in all competitions, an outrageous number. Pep didn't abandon his philosophy. He just streamlined it. Haaland became the finisher, not the orchestrator. City cut the frills, increased tempo. Most importantly, they rebuilt the system to dominate both with the ball and with space. John Stones from defender to unmarked metronome. Late in the season, Guardiola revealed another twist. He pushed John Stones, a centre-back, into a second pivot role beside Rodri. Stones didn't just defend, he passed, dictated rhythm, moved into zones no one expected. Together, he and Rodri formed a double pivot of control, stabilizing midfield, the heart of any title-winning team. It was Guardiola at his tactical zenith. Every player, every position, every angle of space shaped exactly how he envisioned it. No more obsession, just release. The win against Inter wasn't spectacular. But Pep cried. Not from joy. From weight lifted. 12 years after his last Champions League triumph with Barcelona. After all the questions, all the ridicule, all the doubts. He had finally done it. No more, can Pep win the Champions League without Messi. No more, is possession football dead. His philosophy had been validated in silver. But when you're standing on the summit, there's only one way left to go. The 2023 season was undeniable, a historic peak. But it was also a turning point. The squad was aging. Many key players had passed the 30 mark. The brutal match schedule wore them down. And Pep, the master planner, began to show signs of fatigue. Every revolution has a ceiling. The question was no longer, can he do it again? But rather, does he still have the energy to begin all over again? No one expected that just 1 year after the treble, City would plunge into their worst crisis of the Guardiola era. Not because opponents had caught up. Not because Pep changed his beliefs. But because of the one thing no system can fully control. Injury. Age. And the limits of the human body. It started with one collision that changed everything. September 22, 2024. City vs. Arsenal. In the 21st minute, Rodri, the heartbeat of the system, collapsed after a challenge from Thomas Partey. The verdict, torn ACL. 7 months out. The whole squad fell silent. Even Pep, usually stoic, looked visibly shaken. Since arriving in 2019, Rodri had barely missed a match. And every time he did, City trembled. Without Rodri, City were an orchestra without a conductor. No Rodri meant no tempo. No pivot. No presence. Pep tried everything. Move Stones into midfield? Injured. Use Kovacic? Not fit enough. Give Lewis a shot? Too raw. Nothing worked. From October to December, Manchester City won just 1 of 13 matches. A statistic unheard of in Pep's entire coaching career. Everything collapsed at once. Not just Rodri. De Bruyne re-injured. Bernardo Silva and Ake battled fatigue. Stones limped off after 8 minutes against Real Madrid. Pep admitted, for the first time, the team feels old. And he was right. 11 players were over 30. 3 matches a week had drained them physically, mentally, structurally. Control doesn't work if the body can't obey the mind. As legs slowed down, 5-meter passing lanes became 7 wide, enough for opponents to intercept. As thinking speed dropped, triangles broke apart. And when belief wavered, City were no longer City. They were eliminated by Real Madrid in the Champions League playoff. Knocked out of the League Cup by Spurs. And finally lost 0-1 to Crystal Palace in the FA Cup final. A season without a single trophy. Whispers of an ending. The headlines wrote themselves. Has Guardiola lost his magic? Pundits declared. The death of an empire begins with the fall of just one man. Fans were stunned. Just 1 season ago, a treble. Now, ashes. But Pep didn't run, renewing the contract in the middle of a storm. November 2024. Amid the losing streak, Pep signed a 2-year extension committing to stay until 2027. "You don't walk away when things get hard," he said. It was uncharacteristic. At Barcelona and Bayern, Pep had left when the fatigue set in. But this time, he stayed. Maybe after everything, City had become more than a job. Maybe it had become home. The end of an era. De Bruyne departs. April 2025. Kevin De Bruyne announced he would leave Manchester City after nearly a decade. Over 100 goals. Over 100 assists. The heartbeat of Guardiola's vision and the architect of some of the most beautiful football the Premier League has ever seen. With De Bruyne's departure, a golden era truly closed. No more Silva. No more Kompany. No more Aguero. No more Gundogan. And now no more Kevin. Winter had come. But what comes after winter? When a great team declines, it faces two options: collapse or reinvent. City chose to rebuild. They signed Tijani Reijnders, a dynamic midfielder from AC Milan. They brought in Ryan Cherki, a gifted but unpredictable young attacker from Lyon. And behind the scenes, they made a bold move, replacing sporting director Txiki Begiristain with Hugo Viana. The Club World Cup in the US became an unexpected testing ground. City thrashed Al Ahly and looked lively again. But no one could say for sure. Was spring truly on the horizon? A contract unlike any other Pep had signed. In the past, Guardiola left before things broke down. At Barcelona, he departed without being pushed. At Bayern, he left after 3 dominant years. But here, at City, he stayed. He extended his contract during a full-blown crisis. Not for fame. Not for money. But for something else: responsibility. "I can't leave now. I won't turn my back when the club needs me most," he told reporters in November 2024. This wasn't just the tactical genius speaking. This was a man who understood. When you stay somewhere long enough, it stops being a project. It becomes your home. Rebuilding isn't about transfers, it's about mindset. Losing De Bruyne wasn't just a transfer loss. It was a symbolic fracture, the end of City's golden generation. Rumors swirled. Walker could leave. Bernardo too. Even Ederson. Guardiola had no choice but to start again. But rebuilding isn't just about signing young players. It's about rebuilding habits. Rethinking tempo. Reigniting hunger in a squad that had grown used to dominance, and now faced defeat. 3 signings, 3 strategic signals. City didn't just buy talent. They sent messages. Tijani Reijnders, not flashy like De Bruyne, but mobile, intelligent, and disciplined, the kind of player who enables others. Ryan Cherki, the enigmatic talent of French football, a mix of Benzema and Ben Arfa. Technically brilliant. But can he fit into Guardiola's high-discipline structure? Ryan Ait-Nouri, an instinctively attacking left-back from Wolves, an unlikely profile for Pep's positional game. But that's the point. Guardiola wasn't looking to fit people into an old system. He was trying to build a new one around new types of players. Hugo Viana, a quiet but crucial shift. Beneath the surface, the biggest change wasn't on the pitch. Txiki Begiristain, Pep's longtime sporting ally since Barcelona, stepped down. In came Hugo Viana, a former Portuguese international known for rebuilding Sporting CP and ending their 19-year title drought. Viana is known for spotting young talent, investing in academies, and thinking long-term. His arrival signaled something bigger. City wasn't just rebuilding for Pep. They were preparing for a future that could thrive even without him. Club World Cup 2025, a dress rehearsal for a new era. With the Premier League gone, and the Champions League out of reach, Manchester City entered the 2025 Club World Cup with one thing in mind: experimentation. And in the United States they began to breathe again. A 6-0 demolition of LN. Fast, vertical football. A fluid midfield with Richnders. Moments of brilliance from Cherki. 8 Nori rampaging like a true wing-back. This wasn't a return to greatness. But it was a flicker of light after a long, hard winter. Pep smiled again. Young players got chances. And for the first time in months, people started talking about the future, not the past. But does rebuilding mean rebirth? No one knows. Does Pep still have the energy to restart the cycle? Can the younger players handle the demands of his tactical system? And more importantly, can he let go of old obsessions, to rediscover a new version of himself? The 2025-26 season won't be just another campaign. It will be a final test. Is Guardiola still a revolutionary? Or is he now just the last man guarding a fading golden age? 9 years of power, beauty, and burden. For nearly a decade, Manchester City weren't just the most successful team in England. They were a symbol of control, of modernity, of beauty in motion. And behind it all was one man. Pep Guardiola. From early doubts, to total domination, to the crossroads of decline. His journey followed the full arc of every great revolution. It began with vision. Exploded into triumph. Wavered under pressure. And now arrives at the moment where we must all ask. Are we still moving forward, or just repeating what once worked? A philosophy that changed an entire league. Love him or hate him, you can't deny. Guardiola changed English football. Before him, the Premier League prized long balls, physicality, and quick counters. After him, even the most traditional clubs Burnley, Nottingham Forest began building from the back. Before Pep, full-backs defended. After Pep, they passed, tucked into midfield, controlled tempo. No one forced them to change. But when you face a system that perfect, you adapt. Or get left behind. That's the quiet power of a revolution. It reshapes the world, even if the world resents it. But every revolution has a cost. To maintain absolute control, Guardiola paid a heavy price. Players sacrificed individual flair for the sake of the system. Tiny mistakes became fatal because the more precise the machine, the more fragile it becomes. And the man who inspired it all became the most exhausted. For many seasons, Pep lived like an artist constantly afraid of running out of ideas. After every Champions League slip, he asked himself, am I still capable of creating? After every injury, is my system too delicate? Greatness is lonely. And Pep has lived at the summit for too long. 2025, a quiet pause to reflect. Rodri's injury. De Bruyne's farewell. A season with no trophies. It's not the end. But it is a warning. No empire lasts forever. Guardiola once said, I don't stay for trophies. I stay because the job isn't finished. So what is the unfinished task? To rebuild a younger City? To rediscover purpose after crisis? Or simply, to end the final chapter on his own terms? Only he knows. And if this is the end, then let it be a beautiful one. Not every dynasty ends with a trophy. Some end with a whisper and echo longer than any roar.